The House will attend to a prayer by the member from Exeter, Representative Alexis Simpson.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Source of love and for giving us the opportunity to be together one last time this biennium. In the midst of the devastation and heartbreak of global conflict and natural disasters, you have given us an opportunity to connect with one another. Remind us that even in the midst of the chaos of political campaigning, it is the human connection here that is most valuable. The relationships that drive this work, that allow us to negotiate, to compromise, and to come together to serve the greater good. Let us never forget that there are people who care about us. As we mourn the loss of Fish and Game Conservation Officer Levi Fry, let us remember that life is a struggle for many people. May you surround his family and the families of all those who mourn with your love and your care. Please show us how we can continue to show up for one another and offer help in all the ways that we are able. In the words of St. Francis, O God, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is offense, let us bring pardon. Where there is discord, let us bring union. Where there is error, let us bring truth. Where there is doubt, let us bring faith. Where there is despair, let us bring hope. Where there is darkness, let us bring your light. Where there is sadness, let us bring joy. O Lord, grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that one receives, it is in self-forgetting that one finds, it is in forgiving that one is forgiven, it is in dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen.
The chair recognizes a member from Stratham, Representative Zoe Manos, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The chair now recognizes Chris Eaton of Stratham, who will sing our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
The House will attend to requests for leaves of absence.
Mr. Speaker, the day, illness, Representatives Freitas, David Page, Palmer, Rafter, Sanborn, Gregory Smith, Testerman, Ward. The day, important business, Representative Orrs, Ebel, Edwards, Gregg, Griffin, Janesian, Carol McGuire, Dan McGuire, McLean, and Trottier. The day, illness in the family, Representatives Judy and McMahon.
These leaves of absence shall be granted unless otherwise ordered by the House. The House will be in order. The House will attend to the introduction of guests.
Mr. Speaker, please welcome Jared Eaton, husband of the singer, and Mark Reardon, guests of Representative Manos, Jolene Farmer and Delaney Voglian, guests of Representative Fract, Lisa Van de Castile, sister of Representative Van de Castile, Michael Aaron, husband of Representative Aaron, Denise Vose, wife of Representative Vose, Dana Albrecht, Tom Bloomquist, Pam Brown, Scott Breyer, Pierre DuPont, Linda Franz, Peter Kajowski, Janet Larson, Rita McGrath, Robert Merrill Jr., Brian Morse, Ray Peoples, Matt Poulin, Jennifer Smith, and Tim Sweets here, guests of Representatives Kutob and Hobson. They are with us in the gallery today.
Welcome to the New Hampshire House. The House will now attend to communications.
Mr. Speaker, in an email dated June 25, 2024, good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I hope your summer is off to a good start. I have been honored to have served in the New Hampshire House of Representatives for this, my second term. The experience is one I shall cherish forever. I'm equally grateful to have met and befriended several fellow representatives, not the least of whom is you. At this time, I submit to you my resignation from the House effective July 1, 2024, as I'm preparing to move to another state in order to pursue exciting new personal and professional endeavors. Thank you, and may God bless you. Sincerely, Jeffrey Greason. In a communication dated Friday, July 5th, Dear Paul, please accept this as notification of my resignation from my position of the New Hampshire House effective July 17, 2024. I understand this disruption of this departure, and I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. Unfortunately, due to my moving from Merrimack to Florida, I am no longer able to serve the residents of Merrimack in the House. I want to thank all staff and members of the House for their guidance and support during my 2 terms. I also especially want to thank the citizens of Merrimack for placing their trust in me to represent them for the past 4 years. Sincerely, Robert V. Healy. In a communication dated July 22nd, Speaker Packard, I regretfully resign from the New Hampshire House of Representatives effective at 5 p.m. on July 31st, 2024. I will be moving out of state and thus will not be able to serve my district. Respectfully, Shaun Filiault. In a letter dated August 27, 2024, this is to tell everyone that I am resigning from my position as a state representative. It has been a rewarding experience serving the state, but my health has declined to the point that I will check into Riverside Rest Home tomorrow. Sincerely, Cecelia Rich. In a communication dated August 30th, 2024, Mr. Clerk, I have been proud to serve the City of Manchester for the last 2 years as one of its New Hampshire State Representatives, so it is with great gratitude and a little sorrow that I must resign from this position. My time in the New Hampshire House has been both an absolute pleasure and one of difficulty. Thank you and your staff for the grace and patience you have shown over the last 2 years. I look forward to continuing to make New Hampshire a New Hampshire for all. Best, Damond Ford. And in a letter dated September 11, 2024, Dear Mr. Speaker and Clerk, it is with great regret that I must resign my office, State Representative of Cheshire County District 11, effective immediately. My privacy was invaded by the Winchester Town Clerk, in which he entered our gated backyard and looked into several windows into our home. We have purchased a home in a surrounding town and will no longer be residents of the town of Winchester. It has been a great honor to have served my town and state. Thank you for the incredible experience. Regards, Zachery J. Nutting.
These resignations are accepted with regret. The House will attend to an enrolled bills amendment, Senate Bill 137 FN. Representative Osborne and Wilhelm move the adoption of the amendment. The chair recognizes the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, the enrolled bill amendment process is one of clarification and correction. The enrolled bill amendments that are presented and prepared by the Office of Legislative Services are made as technical corrections to bills as they have passed. However, in this instance, for Senate Bill 137, it was a bill that was filed in the first year of the session, and it was a companion piece to another bill. The other bill amended RSA 179.13, which included an increase in a fee from $100 to $250, and this was passed and signed into law in the first year of the session. Senate Bill 137 was re-referred in the Senate in the first year, which is our version of retained, and they acted on it at the beginning of this year and sent it to Commerce. The specific provisions of the bill had ties into the one that was signed into law last year. And because the other one was a companion piece, this one was not amended in the proper sections of increasing that same fee. So the fee was still in this bill as it passed this chamber, $100, reflecting last year's initial bill filing. So OLS drafted an enrolled bill amendment to up the fee to $250 to reflect what is in current law as of right now. The clerks of both chambers met with their respective leadership teams, and we felt that because this is a substantive change rather than a technical change, that it was best to have the House and the Senate vote on it in full to reflect the will of the bodies. And that is why this amendment is before you now.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. The ayes have it, and the enrolled bills amendment is adopted. We are moving on to the veto messages now. The House will attend to the Governor's veto message on House Bill 194FN, requiring the Director of the Division of Historical Resources to compile and maintain a list of public monuments and requiring legislative approval, the amendment, or permanent removal of historic markers. The question before the House is, notwithstanding the Governor's veto, shall House Bill 194FN become law? Chair recognizes Representative Vail.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 194 was intended to be a bill that simply put a list of public monuments on the DNCR website so that historical monuments can be visited by students from across the country who compete on this activity, like peak bagging is done up in the White Mountains on the 48 4,000 footers. So this bill went through our committee, but when it went over to the Senate, there was an amendment that we didn't hear. And that's where the problem lies for us. We believe that this is a House matter and that the historic markers program is really different than what we were talking about. We would like you to have the opportunity to weigh in on this, but we're asking you to vote no, please. And that is because we want to uphold the veto on the bill. I just wanted to mention on a more personal level that I was able to sit next to somebody who's an archaeologist who often interfaces with the state of New Hampshire and the Department of Cultural and Natural Resources. And she has a lot of information about the historic marker program that I would love for her to be able to testify in front of us so we could have a robust discussion. And she mentioned a couple of things about the program that exists right now, such as it already has a small budget of its own for reviewing these matters, and so it's not a question of money. So I believe, and I hope that you understand, that this robust discussion should take place, should the bill be filed again, and we are happy to do that. We want you to have a chance, and we want the public to have a chance to come before the House. Thank you. Vote no.
Chair recognizes Representative Ronzullo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since 1958, the state of New Hampshire has been marking sites of historical importance through the New Hampshire Historical Highway Marker Program. As of today, there are 291 such markers. There are new ones being adopted as we speak. This bill doesn't change the existing process, but it adds an additional steps which will involve the legislature in any decision to or permanently remove any existing marker. I repeat, existing markers, not new ones. This action was brought on by reports of a lack of transparency and public input in situations where the reviews of an existing marker for revision or retirement was requested. The original Senate amendment proposed that an approval of the revision or retirement of a marker be by legislative action only. That seemed cumbersome. So a committee conference was convened to come up with a solution. A lot of the discussion of the conference committee determined the review by the fiscal committee would be simplest and most effective. The governor's veto of HB 194 focuses solely on the Senate amendment to House Bill 194, which looks to involve the legislature in any decision to amend or permanently remove any existing marker. Yes, there are separations of power, but the distribution of power is not equal. All the powers rest with the people, and we are the legislature represent them. Now, I want to take a minute to fill you in, members of the committee, fill you in on the members of the Committee of Conference. There were three Senate conferees. The Democrat senator had served 6 terms in the Senate and 2 terms in the House. The first Republican senator had served 1 term in the Senate and 3 terms in the House, once as a chair. The second Republican senator has served 8 terms in the House, 8 terms in the Senate and 4 terms in the House, and is the Senate Majority Leader. The 4 House conferees, the first Republican House member served 7 terms and is a chair. The second Republican House member served 9 terms and is a chair. The first Democrat House member has served 13 terms and is a former chair of Finance and Judiciary. And the second Democrat House member has served 10 terms and is the former Minority Leader, the former Majority Leader, and former Speaker of the House, and now Speaker Emeritus. That's 126 years of legislative experience. That's a hell of a lot of horsepower to throw at such a small bill. With that, I thank you.
The state constitution requires a roll call. A 2/3 vote is required to override a veto. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. The House will be in order. This is a roll call vote. Chair recognizes Representative Germano for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that I am the prime sponsor of the bill that I am asking you all to sustain a veto on, and if I know that we owe a debt of gratitude to our House colleagues who served on the Committee of Conference, if I know that the process of responding to public concerns about how our shared history is memorialized needs to be worked on, but if I know that the bill as we have before us did not receive the time and attention and the debate that it should have had in committee, and if I know that the interest of the public is not served by subjecting this process to the partisan political fights and maneuvers which would result from the amendment that was attached to the original bill, would I now press the red button to sustain the veto? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Anzulo for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that the ultimate responsibility for protecting our heritage should rest with the people's representatives, then would I vote to override the veto? Hit the green.
This is a roll call vote. If you are in favor of having the bill become law, you will press the green button. If you are opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Selig and Newell. Thank you. Representative Manos. Representative Terry.
While members present had an opportunity to vote, House will tend to stay to the vote. 132 voting nay, 195 voting nay. The governor's veto was sustained. The House will attend to the governor's veto message on House Bill 274 relative to the administration rulemaking process. The question before the House is, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall House Bill 274 become law? Chair recognizes Representative Stephen Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill does a couple of simple things, and by the way, we passed it out of here unanimously. If a state agency or department goes before the Joint Legislative Committee to propose a rule, and they say no a few times, and the stakeholders involved say no, probably more than a few times, and then it gets challenged in court, and the court says, yeah, you can't do this. Right now, that's just the end of it. There's no consequence. The governor's veto message complains that we didn't give a fiscal note on what these legal fees were going to be. I have a suggestion for the executive branch. When JLCAR says no and the stakeholders say no, stop it. You know how that's going to turn out. Don't expect that there won't be a consequence. Now, today they can expect there won't be a consequence, but there isn't one, but I'm asking you to give them one. It's really simple. He complained that some of the provisions are onerous. When rules are proposed, They have to notify any known stakeholders and the Legislative Policy Committee. That's onerous. That isn't onerous, it's necessary. If they're going to get policy right, it is necessary for the branches of government to talk to each other. I don't blame them. It's making their job a little harder. If I was the governor, I might have vetoed it too, but I'm not. I'm a state representative, and my first job is to keep the power here in the people's house where we are closest to the people. So please, endorse this new process and provide a consequence for rules that are against legislative intent, and press the green button today.
The state constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. This is a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. This is a roll call vote. If you're in favor of having the bill become law, you will press the green button. If you're opposed, you will wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Seaworth. Representative Gould. Representative Manos.
If all members present had an opportunity to vote, House will tend to stay to the vote. 320 voting yea, 5 voting nay. The governor's veto is overridden. The House will attend to the governor's veto message on House Bill 396, permitting classification of individuals based on biological sex under certain limited circumstances. Chair recognizes Representative Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 396 is a relatively short bill. Effectively, it's one page worth of legislation. What it does is it confines our discrimination statutes and our policy in 3 critical areas. I want to highlight Section 2, and I want to read it. In athletic or sporting events or competitions in a sport of similar activity in which physical strength, speed, or endurance is generally recognized to give an advantage to biological males. We have sports for kids. Volleyball, basketball, soccer. In wrestling, we segregate it by weight for a reason. We know that physical strength and body mass actually create a distinct advantage, so we have weight classes. But we don't do that for soccer. We don't ask the athletes to show up on the field and step on a scale to know whether they can play that day, but we do for wrestling. We could segregate our sports by just creating co-ed and allowing all the kids to play. That option exists for all the schools in the state. We haven't done that, but that is a way to address the issue before us. We could ask that the schools segregate it by body mass, but we don't. We segregate it by biological sex. And we do that because we do know that there are distinct advantages for biological men relative to women, boys versus girls, on the field. 2 of my children are over 6'4". Imagine my high school junior age son deciding he wanted to be on the volleyball team or on the basketball team in the girls' room. He would have a distinct advantage, height-wise, over all the other players. That disenfranchises our young girls in 2 major ways. And for the record, he won't do that. But my point is, it disenfranchises girls who want to participate in these sports, who want a scholarship to a college. It also puts them in grave danger of being hurt. We've seen this on the field. That's the reason we've created girls soccer and boys soccer, girls basketball and boys basketball, girls volleyball and boys volleyball. There is a reason we're doing this. It's to protect the participants in the sport. I would ask that you would support the override. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Perez.
Thank you. A very wise grandfather gave me these words about 6 months ago, and I've used them many times here in the legislature. You cannot provide equity for 100% of the people 100% of the time, but you do have an obligation to protect the safety of the majority, especially in sensitive situations. Let us fulfill this obligation to the majority. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Tor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In July, Governor Sununu vetoed House Bill 396, and that was the right decision. Let me start by reading from the governor's veto message. I quote, "In 2018, Republicans and Democrats passed legislation to prevent discrimination because, as I said at the time, it is unacceptable and runs contrary to New Hampshire's live free or die spirit. That still rings true today. The challenge with House Bill 396 is that in some cases it seeks to solve problems that have not presented themselves in New Hampshire, and in doing so invites unnecessary discord." Well said, Governor. That 2018 bill, House Bill 1319, was entitled simply Prohibiting Discrimination Based on Gender Identity, and it did truly embody the state's live free or die spirit. By comparison, House Bill 396 not only undermines that spirit, but it does so in the most dangerous and irresponsible way. House Bill 396 is an invasion of privacy at its core. Lacking any definition of the term biological sex or how it would be applied, if this bill were to become law, somebody could simply look at an individual trying to use a restroom and tell them which bathroom they must use based on their appearance, the very definition of discrimination. Other options for determining that person's biological gender would be far more invasive still. I'll let you use your imagination there. It's also relevant to note that a separate New Hampshire law passed this session, stemming from House Bill 1205, covers similar ground and currently has our state embroiled in a federal lawsuit. That law requires that female athletes, and only female athletes, must show proof of their gender at birth when signing up for sports. It has been challenged for violating, not for upholding, the provisions of Title IX. So let's not force through another law that will only lead to further confusion, discord, discrimination, and litigation when we have a clear statute preventing these very things on our books. Let's vote to uphold the state's live free or die spirit by supporting the governor's veto of this bill and voting no on the override question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Kofod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 396 came before the Judiciary Committee almost 2 years ago. And I remember it well. It was about a 3-hour hearing. Went till 7 or 7:30 in the evening. And there were two people who testified who really stood out to me. One of those was a transgender person who was opposed to the bill, who said, "We may be the people working in the hospital who take care of you when you're sick. We may be the people in the ambulance who pick you up and take you there. Some of us are the people who are clearing the roads so that you can get to work and you can get your kids to school." The message was, don't hate us. And that struck me because my response, I don't hate you. I never have. And yet that's how that bill is being framed. I think that on many issues, both on the left and the right, we are being taught to believe that if we differ on policy, we must therefore hate each other. That is not true. It is an easy sell, though, because sometimes there's some truth to it. Polarization is power, and it benefits people who are pushing for pure, zero-sum, win-lose outcomes. It does not benefit those of us who want to settle our differences, figure out a way that we can all live together with acceptable outcomes. Sometimes win-win situations are very, very hard to find. Sometimes it seems impossible, but they're out there if we look for them. So there was a second person who testified that stands out in my mind. She was a young mother from Milford, New Hampshire. She told us that she was the victim of sexual assault, that she's been in therapy for years, that she takes antidepressants, and that she cries every day in the shower. All I want to do, she said, is to protect my 12-year-old daughter. Her 12-year-old daughter was a student in the Milford school system. A 17-year-old boy in the Milford school system had taken to using the bathrooms and locker rooms, including the girls' locker room at times, the boys' locker room at times, would come in with his friends and would make fun of this 12-year-old girl and her friends while they were getting changed. I don't know how we solve that problem. I don't believe that there is a one-size-fits-all solution to honoring the people who are opposed to the bill and protecting that 12-year-old girl in Milford. This bill is the best shot I think we have at that. The world is far more nuanced than CNN or Fox News would have any of us believe. And if we allow other people to write our narratives for you, if we allow other people to completely validate one point of view and completely invalidate the other point of view, then we are destined to continue on the path that we are on. We have seen what happens when the us-them paradigm prevails in other countries around the world and throughout history. We have not reached peak intensity yet, although I think a lot of people think we have here in the United States, and we don't have to. I have referred to House Bill 396 on occasion as the "can't we all get along" bill. I know others don't see it that way. But the question is, how do we navigate this new normal together in a way that we can all live with? One-size-fits-all solutions don't work in a lot of cases, and this is one of those cases. I don't imagine that my speech or any of the other speeches here today are going to change votes on this veto override. But I think our nation and our world are in a very dangerous place, especially as we approach an upcoming election that has global consequences. We need to be able to step away from the us-them paradigm, from the this or that, black and white narrative, and see each other as human beings. So I came up here not really knowing whether this was going to resonate. I would ask my colleagues to vote to override the veto. Having said that, if you don't vote to override the veto, vote your conscience, and if anything I've said resonates, I ask you that when you leave the chambers today, you take it out with you and back to your community. Thank you.
The state constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. This is a roll call vote. Chair recognizes Representative Devine for a parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, if I know that at its core, House Bill 396 sends the message, you are a freak, what are you doing here in a bathroom, locker room, or on a sports team, no matter how its supporters dress it up. And if I know the Milford incident should have been a school disciplinary issue or a crime that the police should handle, then would I press the red button in favor of sustaining the governor's veto of a misguided attempt at regulation, cutting through decisiveness rhetoric masquerading as concern for women's safety. And just once, Mr. Speaker, I know you can recognize a bad bill. I hope you'll vote with us.
Chair recognizes Representative Kofall for a parliamentary inquiry. Representative Kofall is waived off. This is a roll call vote. If you're in favor of having the bill become law, you will press the green button. If you're opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative McWilliams.
All members present had an opportunity to vote. House will attend the state of the vote. 164 voting yea, 168 voting nay. The override fails. The House... The House will attend to the Governor's veto message on House Bill 1093 prohibiting mandatory mask policies in schools. Chair recognizes Representative Coratello.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last March, this body voted to pass HB 1093, the bill prohibiting school boards from mandating mask wearing. The body on the other side of this wall did the same soon thereafter. Since that time, there has been some relevant new evidence that has emerged to further support this bill. On May 31st, the testimony that Anthony Fauci had months earlier given to a congressional subcommittee was finally released. When Fauci was asked by a member of this committee if he had followed any of the numerous scientific studies concerning learning loss and other negative effects on children wearing masks, Fauci said, no. He then admitted, there are a lot of conflicting studies. There are those that say, yes, there is an impact, and there are those that say there's not. I still think that's up in the air. The doctor was further asked if there was ever a cost-benefit analysis done on the unintended consequences of masking kids versus the protection that it would give them. He answered, not to my knowledge. During his testimony, he also admitted that the 6-foot social distancing sort of just appeared and was not based on any scientific studies. From his other statements, it seems likely that mask mandates emerged in a similar way. His testimony asserts that there is indeed a strong, reasonable doubt regarding the effectiveness of masks and a growing concern for their possible harmful effects. These shocking revelations seem to have been overlooked as HB 1093 was nevertheless vetoed. Dr. Fauci, the doctor who headed one of the organizations recommending masks, had not even been following the research being done on their effects on children, and then admitted that there is no certainty that mask wearing did not negatively impact students. During the COVID pandemic, we continuously heard the phrase, follow the science. The science, as reflected in the many conflicting studies that have emerged, does not provide clear justification for mask mandates. No one, especially a child, should be forced to do something that could possibly cause him or her physical and even emotional harm. Unless face masks are proven beyond a shadow of a doubt to be harmless, they should not ever be mandated by school boards. In his veto message, the governor cited the importance of local control, a concept that usually makes sense in our state school districts. But this concept of local control does not give school boards the authority to make health decisions for students. In fact, to do so is unethical. A recent article in the Archives of Disease in Childhood concluded that recommended child masking is unsupported by current scientific data and inconsistent with accepted ethical norms. Decisions regarding the use of any medical intervention should rightfully be left to parents. To protect children from the potential harm of mask wearing and to recognize that the most fundamental unit of local control is the family, the governor's veto should be overridden. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Bell Boney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 1093 would prohibit mandatory mask policies in schools. It would eliminate the ability of local school districts to put in place practices, procedures, and policies to protect students and staff in the event of any health emergency, regardless of guidance provided by state or local health officials. No one can predict what will happen in the future. Best practices in health, disease, and prevention continue to evolve based upon scientific advances. As the governor has noted, we have a responsibility to ensure the state minimizes its infringement on local control. Our local elected school boards should have the freedom to respond to health emergencies according to the individual needs of their community to best protect their children. I urge you to vote no to sustain the governor's veto. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Noble.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of overriding the veto of HB 1093. The veto message states that just because we don't like a local decision doesn't mean that we should remove their authority. However, in February of 22, the governor did remove local authority for mask mandates. As the public health guidance had changed, school districts were told that they would be in violation of the rules if they did not end their mask mandates. That's not local control. The state believed, at least in that moment, that state public health experts were more qualified to make the decision about mask policies. Instead of threatening the school districts with rules violations well over a year into their policies, the state should have taken those rules into account from the very beginning to protect New Hampshire students and to promote a partnership between local districts and families. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. In fact, parents' concerns with masks causing barriers to learning were ignored. Concerns with masks causing children to have behavioral and mental health issues were ignored. Parents just wanting their healthy children to be able to breathe freely were ignored. Parents seeking an exemption for autism or asthma were ignored. These mask mandates did not meet the instructional needs of each individual student or promote a school environment that was conducive to learning. The truth is that fear won during COVID, and students and science lost, while school boards dealt with significant blowback for their mask mandates. That must be corrected. Decisions about mask mandates are best left to experts at the state level, where emotions can be tempered with scientific facts and a proper risk-benefit analysis can be done. This is not a big government approach like the veto message says. This is government taking responsibility for public health and not forcing the decision-making onto local school boards that are not equipped to make those decisions. I'd be willing to bet that many school boards never want to be faced with that responsibility again. The veto message states that big government is never the solution, and neither is a one-size-fits-all approach. But the state takes this exact approach with another medical intervention required to attend school, the vaccine schedule. Should we allow school boards to create vaccine policy? Would it be acceptable for Manchester to say, thank you for providing guidance, but we will only require these 2 vaccines to attend school? Or for Hollis to say, we aren't going to require any vaccines at all? Local control. Just as one district could say we will mandate masks every flu season and another that leaves it to parent choice, the problem is none of that promotes fair and equitable access to education. As stated in the veto message, one of the state's foremost responsibilities is to know the limits of its power. I agree. But it is also our responsibility to protect the individual from being infringed upon by any level of government. I urge you to support both students and school boards by pressing the green button to override this veto. Thank you.
The state constitution requires a roll call. A 2/3 vote is required to override a veto. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. This is a roll call vote. Chair recognizes Representative Luno for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know this bill is bad public health policy, and if I voted no on this bill before, then wouldn't I press the red button now to prevent this bill from becoming law? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Noble for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that decisions about mask mandates are best left to experts at the state, if I know that if this were to become law, it would protect school boards from being put in the middle of contentious mask debates, and finally, if I know that we can never let this happen to New Hampshire students again, would I now press the green button to override this veto?
This is a roll call vote. If you're in favor of having the bill become law, you will press the green button. If you are opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Yokella.
If all members present had an opportunity to vote, House will tend to stay the vote. 160 voting yea, 172 voting nay. The governor's veto is sustained. House will attend to the governor's veto message on House Bill 1187 relative to prohibiting lease agreements of equipment for building or facility improvements. Chair recognizes Representative Power.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of overriding the veto and House Bill 1187 becoming law. This is a common sense bill that had wide bipartisan support in both the House and the other chamber. This bill was unanimously recommended ought to pass as amended 20-0 by the Municipal and County Government Committee. It passed the House on a voice vote on the consent calendar, and then the Senate amendment was concurred by the House also by a voice vote. This bill modifies RSA 33-7E titled Lease Agreements of Equipment pertaining to lease purchase agreements with a non-appropriation clause, also called an escape clause, so that equipment leased under this RSA do not contain permanently installed equipment nor facility improvements or building renovations that become fixtures. Understand the legislative intent of this RSA is for equipment, such as a vehicle like a fire truck, ambulance, or police cruiser, or portable equipment, such as a backhoe, a chipper, or a copy machine. These items are not deeply installed and they do not become fixtures. And importantly, if the escape clause is invoked to end the lease, all of these items are easily returned. Mr. Speaker, this bill is needed because political subdivisions across the state are misusing lease purchase agreements with escape clauses for equipment under RSA 33-7E in order to fund significant facility improvements and building renovations around deeply installed equipment, such as boilers, windows, and LED lighting that all become fixtures. In one case, a 20-year, $25.2 million lease with an escape clause is being used for, quote, overdue repairs and maintenance to facilities, end quote. Unfortunately, this lease is costing taxpayers an estimated $6.5 million more than if a bond was used, since interest rates for lease purchase agreements with escape clauses are always significantly higher than for bonds due to the flexibility to escape the lease. Additionally, escape from this type of a lease for items that become fixtures is not economically feasible. The act of uninstalling, removing, replacing, and reinstalling capital items is both impractical and cost prohibitive. Furthermore, it goes without saying that a leased building renovation or addition cannot be realistically returned. Therefore, the city, town, or school district is essentially locked into the lease, and taxpayers pay for the flexibility of an escape clause that they cannot use. Finally, the veto message clearly reveals that this bill, as well as current RSAs, are unfortunately misunderstood. Specifically, the claims that this bill would effectively prohibit the use of municipal leases to acquire fixtures and that leases must be secured more frequently than bonding opportunities permit are both faulty and incorrect. Let me be very clear. House Bill 1187 absolutely does not prohibit lease agreements. Instead, it narrows the scope of lease purchase agreements covered by RSA 33-7E, and it also clarifies, importantly, what is equipment. Importantly, both leases under RSA 32, as well as energy performance contracting, which falls under 22I, which these types of leases guarantee that savings produced by an energy project will be sufficient to finance the full cost of the project. These are both still supported and are unaffected under this bill, despite last-minute erroneous claims by some lobbyists. Notably, both leases and bonds have the same timeline and equal number of annual opportunities, as both are proposed as part of the annual budget and annual meeting process. To conclude, House Bill 1187 is a common sense bill that adjusts the scope of lease purchase agreements with an escape clause. This bill ensures that leases under RSA 337E do not contain permanently installed equipment that become fixtures, nor building renovations, which makes the lease both impractical to escape and unnecessarily expensive to taxpayers. Importantly, under this bill, lease purchase agreements and energy performance contracting do remain funding options for all political subdivisions under RSA 32 and 21I at a lower cost to taxpayers, which was confirmed by the New Hampshire Municipal Association in the Senate hearings. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, by overriding the veto, we are putting the needs of every Granite Stater who is overpaying in property taxes for these types of leases ahead of the wants of lobbyists. This bill is a positive and needed statutory update for our constituents while ensuring that leasing and energy companies can make a fair but not excessive profit. For these reasons, I urge my fellow colleagues to uphold the position of the House, to support House Bill 1187 becoming law, and vote yes to override the veto by pushing the green button. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The state constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. This is a roll call vote. Chair recognizes Representative Lynn Turcott for a parliamentary inquiry. Representative Turcott waves off. If you're in favor of the bill becoming law, you will press the green button. If you're opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. All members present had an opportunity to vote. House will tend to stay the vote. 161 voting yea, 170 voting nay. The governor's veto is sustained. Chair recognizes the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Enrolled Bills has examined and found correctly enrolled the following entitled House and Senate bills. Senate Bill 137, relative to nano brewery licenses and beverage manufacturers licenses.
The House will attend to the governor's veto message on House Bill 1233 relative to animal chiropractors. The question before the House is notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall House Bill 132 become law? The state constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. This is a roll call vote. Chair recognizes Representative Ellen Reed for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that the Humane Society and other animal welfare organizations supported this bill and still support this bill, and if I know that my constituent, the governor, claimed that the reason he vetoed the bill was that it said anyone that was in a nationally accredited chiropractor program, instead of saying vet or chiropractor, but only vets and chiropractors are admitted into nationally accredited chiropractic programs. And if I know that a human being, and not even a child, needs a referral to see a chiropractor, so why would an animal? And if I know that especially farm animals that carry heavy loads, like draft horses, sustain injuries, that chiropractor service would be cost-efficient and quick to help relieve, but that getting a referral from a vet first could be cost-prohibitive in relieving that animal's pain. And if finally that I know that this bill was unanimously supported by both parties in the committee, both parties unanimous in this chamber, both parties in the committee across the wall, and both parties on the floor across the hall, unanimously, and that I know both parties, members of both parties, still support this bill across the wall, would I now press the green button to override this senseless veto?
This is a roll call vote. If you're in favor of having the bill become law, you will press the green button. If you are opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Perez.
If all members present had an opportunity to vote, House will tend to stay the vote. 179 voting nay, 152 voting nay. The governor's veto is sustained. The House will attend to Governor's veto message on House Bill 1293 relative to the use of certain fertilizers on turf. Chair recognizes Representative Carol Brown. Yes.
Couldn't hear you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, everyone. I've been asked to remind you that I had a career working at DES and spent many hours in the field working on water quality issues. And clean water is extremely important to me, as it is to everyone in the room. And I'm working hard in the Newfound Lake area also for similar issues of nutrient introduction from the watershed into the lake and how we're going to manage that through best management practices on a land use level. This bill, though well-meaning, does put the cart before the horse. It ignores the state's DES cyanobacteria plan and its suggestion for the use of best management practices. The best management practices are the current law for managing golf courses and sod farms in the Department of Agriculture. So phosphorus and nitrogen are the two nutrients that can contribute to algae blooms and drive cyanobacteria blooms as well. However, turf fertilizer now contains little turf as defined in the law. Basically, we're talking about grass. Turf fertilizer contains little or no phosphorus anymore and is no longer likely a major contributor of phosphorus to some watersheds, unlike what you may hear. According to DES and the state cyanobacteria plan, the first thing that we should do to address nutrients going to cyanobacteria blooms is to identify the sources of phosphorus in the watershed. Each watershed specifically, they're all different. Common sources of these nutrients, phosphorus in particular, are wastewater, agricultural runoff, septic, rain, waterfowl, organic matter, the leaves in your yard, weathering of rocks, and historic sediments that are already at the bottom of lakes that have been there for decades. So cyanobacteria is natural, and after all, its growth is enhanced by the introduction of these nutrients, but they can come from many sources. So a recent study from the University of Minnesota found that up to 60% of damage to urban lakes is caused by excess nutrients that are produced by leaf litter, or the leaves that are in your yard. If they're improperly cleaned up, or if they're not disposed of properly, they will break down and they can contribute phosphorus to the environment. That's where you have a brown river, like the Smith River in Danbury. It's a brown river. That's from leaf debris and organic matter breaking down. In DES's testimony to the committee, they state in their letter, excuse me for reading this, nationwide the industry has removed phosphorus from most bags of fertilizer sold at retail. Market forces have largely taken care of this issue at the retail level. In their testimony, DES also expressed concerns on the enforcement of this bill because it has two portions, one that regulates both the landowner and the small businessman, and then it also dictates what can be sold at retail. Furthermore, DES in its cyanobacteria plan has as a second priority, not the first priority, the second priority in the cyanobacteria plan from DES is the development of local overlay plans to manage nutrients. Translate that to your local land use setting plans of its own for its specific watershed. So according to DES, and this makes perfect sense to me from my background working in the field, it's not possible if you take a sample of the lake and phosphorus is X, you don't know where that phosphorus came from. You cannot say it came from fertilizer, or you can't say it came from leaf waste. There's no way to identify at the lake level where did phosphorus come from. And there's little actual sampling to show specific sources. One of the water bodies that was a driver of this legislation, Arlington Reservoir, there is no data, little data the DES has, for identifying where the phosphorus has come from that affects the significant cyanobacteria blooms there. Therefore, regulating phosphorus at the turf level is not going to guarantee in any way whatsoever that you're going to prevent cyanobacteria blooms. The use of best management plans specifically targeted to each watershed is the better solution. Through education, as the tail end of the bill talks about education. This week, one of my fellow representatives received a letter from a lawn fertilization company that states that would have a significant impact on their work. And they also state that they have not been using fertilizer that contains phosphorus since 2013. Most of the work they do is with nitrogen for an annual fertilization of your lawn. Phosphorus generally is only used for new lawns or for recovering bad spots in your lawn. So to summarize that, if that made any sense whatsoever, reducing phosphorus through controlling fertilizer at the home level has an unknown and very likely minimal impact on the phosphorus that ends up in your lakes and ponds. DES recommends that in 3 places, in their phosphorus fact sheet, in their testimony to the committee, and in the state's cyanobacteria plan, the DES recommends using best management plans to make sure that you protect your water bodies from the influx of nutrients. Excuse me. Having spoken with the Assistant Commissioner of DES, the Commissioner of Agriculture, the lead DES person for cyanobacteria, and with a person in agriculture who manages pesticides and fertilizers this week, there's complete agreement among them that all of the regulatory requirements in this bill are unenforceable. And if you were to have read it closely, you would notice that that's the case. They're only enforceable after the fact. Did you apply too much fertilizer? And the homeowner says no, but the neighbor says, oh, I know he did. And then the inspector comes and says, this was 2 weeks ago, there's nothing I can do. So there's a number of things in this bill that are unenforceable in that way. So I thought I'd add a little piece on this at the very end. This is not a vote against the environment if you're concerned about the perception of how you might vote on this. This is truly a vote for the environment because in the long run, money will be more wisely spent on controlling these nutrients as they head towards your surface water in best management practices and by local communities understanding exactly what their watershed is composed of. Do you have a cold, deep lake with a few cottages around it? Do you have a shallow, warm lake with 3 or 4 layers of cottages around it, which is a completely different thing? I have gone over what I was supposed to say, and I'm sure I'm over my 3-minute limit. So I encourage you to vote red and to uphold the governor's veto. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Borders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am actually a co-sponsor of this bill, and I am asking everybody in the House to sustain the governor's veto. House Bill 1293 will make it against the law for an individual to apply any fertilizer on their lawn. During or before a predicted rainfall, when the ground is frozen, when the grass is actively growing, within 25 feet of a storm drain or deposited where it could enter a storm drain, within 25 feet of rivers, streams, creeks, brooks, reservoirs, ponds, lakes, and so forth. Despite these extremely restrictive rules for the lawns of individuals, sod farms and golf courses are exempt from this. So, for example, the Laconia Country Club, which is right on Porgus Bay or a block away from Porgus Bay, would not have these restrictions enforced on it. I live right on Porgus Bay and on Lake Winnipesaukee. We have a major cyanobacteria issue there, but this bill will not help. This is a toothless bill. It will not be enforced. The only time this will be enforced is if a neighbor complains, Joe next door, he over-fertilized his lawn. It's toothless. There is no way to enforce this bill. The Department of Agriculture would only conduct inspections based on a complaint. So if nobody complains, how do we enforce this bill? There are no penalties for the violation of this law. If there's no penalties, what is the use of having a law? If the veto is overturned, an individual in the state who is simply trying to get grass to grow on their yard will likely be in some shape or form in violation of this bill. Again, there's really no enforcement mechanism, but I don't want to be in violation of anything. I don't use fertilizer, but many people do. This bill would sail through in a state like Massachusetts. We are not Massachusetts. We are the live free or die state. As the governor stated in his veto message, if the intent of the legislature was to reduce the impact of these fertilizers in New Hampshire water bodies, then I encourage future legislation to be more targeted towards lakes, streams, and other environmentally sensitive areas, as well as include practical mechanisms for enforcement. Again, if this bill can't be enforced, there's no use in it. I urge everybody here to sustain the governor's veto on this bill. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Creighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I rise in support of overriding the governor's veto for HB 1293. This bill was closely considered in committee. In fact, the letter referenced earlier by my colleague was in due consideration, and the bill was substantially amended with close cooperation with DES, Department of Agriculture, and the Farm Bureau based on the input from that letter. Upon further review, the committee approved the bill 20-0. It passed this body. It also passed the Ways and Means 20-0, and it passed on the other side of the wall 4-0. This bill will help improve and sustain the quality of water in the state. It is a good bill that protects our water, and I support an override of the governor's veto. Please press green. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question before the House is notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall House Bill 1293 become law? The state constitution requires a roll call. Two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. This is a roll call vote. Chair recognizes Representative Harley Beaulieu for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that this bill relies on vague and confusing language and definitions, and if I also know that this bill is unenforceable, and lastly, if I know that phosphorus has been removed from commercial fertilizer, will I now not press the red button and sustain the governor's veto? Thank you.
This is a roll call vote. If you're in favor of having the bill become law, you will press the green button. If you're opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Vale.
If all members present had an opportunity to vote, House will attend to the state of the vote. 232 voting nay, 99 voting nay. Governor's veto was overridden. The House will attend to the governor's veto message on House Bill 1415 relative to PFAS facility liability. Chair recognizes Representative McHugh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I rise today to urge the members to act together to overturn the governor's veto of House Bill 1415. This bill holds PFAS facilities accountable for proper decontamination and cleanup. No amount of these forever chemicals is acceptable. As elected officials, we have a duty to protect our clean water. PFAS contamination is a proven threat, and we must ensure those responsible for pollution, not the taxpayers, bear the cost of cleanup. With 32 years in the district, I've seen the impact of industrial contamination firsthand. As a community paramedic, I've treated people at the ChemFab site long before Saint-Gobain ever took over. In fact, I've witnessed Merrimack Metals and New Hampshire Plating become Superfund sites in our town, and enough is enough. I've been on the Resources Committee and the Commerce Committee, so I've seen both sides of these bills, the regulatory side and the cleanup side. I also serve on the Long-Term Drinking Water Commission, and those colleagues agree also that this is a sensible override. It's not a partisan issue, it's a healthcare issue. Clean water is a good thing. It's about protecting our families from this long-term health risk. The Resources Committee passed this on a voice vote, or passed it 20-0, and the House passed it on consent on a voice vote. So now it's time we get together, override the governor's veto, safeguard our water. Let's do what's right for the people of New Hampshire. Please press the green button today and override this veto. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Nancy Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 1415 addresses the needs to hold PFAS polluters accountable for the immense costs they create by contaminating New Hampshire's air, water, and soil. In Merrimack alone, we have spent millions of dollars to remove a company's PFAS from our drinking water. That this financial burden has been placed upon taxpayers who are already bearing the health costs is absolutely unjust, and it should be illegal. On behalf of the communities we represent, we have the power and responsibility right now to do the right thing and right this wrong. HB 1415 forces polluters to pay for their own cleanup and will also serve as a deterrent for other PFAS polluters, making them think twice about how they handle these toxic chemicals. Even low levels of residual contamination on equipment, piping, and structures can contribute to soil and groundwater contamination and potential human exposure. We must empower DES to hold polluters accountable to core federal requirements applicable to hazardous waste generating facilities, ensuring that PFAS facilities that have adversely impacted our water sources be promptly decontaminated upon closure and cease posing a threat of harm. This bill is all about protecting the health of Granite Staters, safeguarding our natural resources, and making polluters to pay to clean up their own mess. I urge you to press the green button and vote yes to overturn the governor's veto.
Question before the House is notwithstanding the governor's veto, so House Bill 1415 become law. State Constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. This is a roll call vote. Chair recognizes Representative Vail for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that this is a simple bill that asks polluters to pay for toxins they leave in the environment, and if I also know that the bill was unanimous out of committee, that the House voted unanimously on consent calendar, and then it went unanimously out of committee on the other side of the wall and on their consent calendar. And if I also know that there was no testimony against this bill in the hearings, would I now vote yes to override the veto by pushing the green button?
This is a roll call vote. If you're in favor of having the bill become law, you will press the green button. If you are opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Harvey-Molina. No, you can't push it. I need a thumbs up. I need a thumbs up or down. Thank you. All set, sir.
If all members present had an opportunity to vote, House will tend to stay the vote. 289 voting yea, 38. House will be in order. 38 voting nay. The governor's veto is overridden. House will attend to the governor's veto message on House Bill 1581. 1581 relative to cultivation locations for alternative treatment centers. Chair recognizes Representative Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Friends, we sadly find ourselves near the end of our time together. I appreciate the relationships we built, the good laws we have passed in the process. We have the opportunity now to do one more good thing. We can rescue a good bill. House Bill 1581 would allow alternative treatment centers to operate additional cultivation centers, including greenhouses. It had a thorough discussion in Health and Human Services, and it passed on the consent calendar. The governor vetoed this bill, stating, and I quote, "The legislation provides scant detail regarding safety, security, and location requirements. These details are necessary to ensure appropriate controls on a regulated substance." So the good news is, that's all already in administrative rules. Current law allows multiple dispensing locations, and this bill echoes the same language to enable multiple cultivation locations. Both refer to the rulemaking authorization that's already there, but there is one other section for the dispensing locations. So I made sure that that didn't matter. I went through all 65 pages of administrative rules dealing with safety, security, and location. Not once did it cite that extra little bit for the extra dispensing locations. So quite frankly, we don't need anything more than what was passed. It was a beautifully written, elegant bill that added only the language we needed. We already have safety, security, and location, and this requires the municipality and the department to meet with stakeholders and make sure they listen to their concerns on location. So while I appreciate the fact that the governor is very concerned to make sure that we're doing it right, we already are. Thank you to the sponsors for not adding extra words, and I ask everybody to vote green to override the veto.
Question before the House is notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall House Bill 1581 become law? State Constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. This is a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. This is a roll call vote. Chair recognizes Representative Leon for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that the governor is concerned about details regarding safety, security, and location requirements, and if I know that these details are already addressed in existing law and administrative rules, and if I know that I wouldn't have given this PI if so many people hadn't have walked out, would I now press the green button?
This is a roll call vote. If you're in favor of having the bill become law, you will press the green button. If you're opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Devine.
All members present had an opportunity to vote. House will attend to state of the vote. 270 voting yea, 55 voting nay. Governor's veto is overridden. House will attend to the governor's veto message on House Bill 1622 FN relative to administrative rulemaking and license renewals by the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification. Question before the House is notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall House Bill 1622 FN become law? State Constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. This is going to be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. This is a roll call vote. If you're in favor of the bill becoming law, you will press the green button. If you are opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. The voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Love. Representative McAleer.
All members present had an opportunity to vote. House will obtain the state of the vote. 318 voting yea, 11 voting nay. Governor's veto is overridden. I'm asking that everyone sit in their seats. We're done with the bills, but we do have some things that are going to happen. So please, sit in your seats for just a little bit. The chair recognizes a member from Auburn, Representative Osborne, for a motion to adjourn from the early session.
Resolved that the House now adjourn from the early session, that the business of the late session be in order at the present time, and that's all.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. This is the last time the legislature will meet before the new term begins in December. There are many of you who won't be returning for the next term. Maybe you chose not to run for re-election or seek another office. Whatever your case may be, we want to thank you for your service to the communities in the state of New Hampshire by serving in a historic body. And I'd like to just read a few of these, and please, no clapping until the end. 20 more years of service, Jeff Goley, Steve Shurtleff. 18 years of service, Andy Renzullo, Mark McConkey, David Bigford, Pat Long, Jane Bolio. 16 years of service, Mike O'Brien. 14 years of service, Lori Sandburn, Joe Petrie. 12 years of service, Bruce Tatro, Dave Hewitt, Latha Metapucci, and Mel Meyer. 11 years of service, Mary Heath. 10 years of service, Tracy Emmerich, J.R. Houle, Amanda Bolden, Susan Trelivian, Michael Abbott, Cliff Newton, and Rebecca Macbeth. Can I have all of those that I read off stand up that are here? And now, can we have everybody that isn't coming back stand up? Everybody that isn't coming back, stand up. And now I want to thank, and I think we all need to give them a tremendous applause. I want to thank the clerk staff, and I want to... I've got to say that they have done an absolute tremendous job over the last 4 years, and especially the last 2 years. And I also want to thank the staff of the General Court, the Majority Office, Minority Office, the Speaker's Office. Without them, I can guarantee you this body probably wouldn't run properly. So they deserve a tremendous round of applause. And we also need to thank committee services and all the other staff people in this building that make this place work. We have one of the smallest staffs in the country, and I can tell you that these people do a tremendous amount of work. And I personally want to thank all of you. Thank you. Chair recognizes the clerk for messages.
Mr. Speaker, the Senate has voted to sustain the governor's veto on the following bills: Senate Bill 63, Senate Bill 318, Senate Bill 501, Senate Bill 507, and Senate Bill 543.
Chair recognizes Representative Ellen Reed for an announcement.
Hey y'all, pizza, free, front lawn, 5 different varieties. We got cheese, pepperoni, veggie, Hawaiian, Philly cheesesteak, and then you get to vote for your favorite one using instant runoff voting, also known as ranked choice voting, and then you get to watch it happen in front of you, be counted, quick, easy, simple. But in any case, no matter what you think, no matter what else happens, you get free pizza.
Chair recognizes Representative Vos.
The Science, Technology, and Energy Committee will meet in executive session 1/2 hour after the conclusion of this veto session in the Legislative Office Building in rooms 302 and 304. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On October 15th at 7 p.m., the Progressive Caucus will meet via Zoom. Please be on the lookout for an email later today. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dairy representatives, please meet over here as soon as we're out.
Chair recognizes Representative Stephen Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republican members and Republican candidates, the Speaker invites you to a reception out the front doors and across the street at Tandy's, where you enjoy a variety of good food, war stories, commiserations, and most importantly, have a beer or glass of wine on the Speaker. Hope to see you there.
Chair recognizes Representative Wilhelm.
Mr. Speaker, I move that your remarks recognizing our long-serving members and our hardworking staff be printed in the Permanent Journal.
Without objection. Chair recognizes the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a couple of quick announcements. Your mailbox is in the back, some of which have not been touched in over a year. Please clean them out because they will be emptied almost immediately after the election because we have to prepare for new folks. And even if you're reelected, your position will probably still move. So please empty out your mailboxes. For non-returning members, if you had a locker, please see Tracy in my office upstairs to return locks and or keys. Easy Pass transponders and door cards, those can be returned to the General Court Administration Office on the first floor. And lastly, just as a personal thank you from me, Mr. Speaker, to all of the members. Last week, I was very fortunate, along with the Senate Clerk and our teams, to host the American Society of Legislative Clerks and Secretaries annual professional development seminar in Manchester. We had the highest attendance we've ever had. And we actually sold through two of the larger hotels in Manchester, the DoubleTree and the True, and we had fantastic reception at the Courier Museum. We had a fantastic day up here at the State House. Some of you met the many clerks and secretaries from around the country, and I just want to thank you for your support. It truly meant a lot. Thank you.
We have one unanimous consent. Representative McWilliams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I rise with both joy, gratitude, and humbleness to speak with you briefly between me and pizza. And apparently free drinks if you're on that side of the aisle, so I'll be brief. Wrapping up my third term, 6th year, I just wanted to do a brief reflection and thank everyone who has served with me for the past 6 years. It's been an honor. 6 years ago, I had just won a primary, and I was sitting up in the gallery on Veto Day, so 6 years ago, Veto Day, and Mary Stuart Giles, who was my predecessor in Merrimack 27, then 30, post-redistricting, Mary Stuart Giles implored us as a body. She said, we really need to find a way to compensate legislators, and we really need to make sure that we are representative of a cross-section of the state. And I want to say that we've done some work to get closer to that, but there is more work to do. So to reiterate that she believed in that, I believe in that, and it's something that we're working on as a team together. We have fortunately upgraded some of our technology. All of you were able to sign in, not today, but when we actually get paid mileage, you were able to sign in and press some buttons and track your mileage. We are so much closer to getting a per diem. While you get your mileage, you could get a per diem if we vote that through next year. Just a thought. In terms of my journey as a legislator, the first year that I was elected, 2019, I was able to work across the aisle with some Republican colleagues to update our building code, and I'm really proud of that work. We also put through a child care business study with some bipartisan work, and that child care business study later turned into the special committee on child care. So we are building to address some of the biggest issues in our state when it comes to child care. As a mom of 3, one of whom is in preschool right now, child care is a huge issue, and I implore you to continue the work for child care next year. It's really important. We've also been bonded together. We went through COVID together. We did a roadshow legislature. We were in an ice arena, an outdoor athletic field, a sports complex, the UNH parking lot, in our cars. And we also modernized during that time. I will tell you that I was nursing as a nursing mom, and I was able to pump in some of those locations. And when we came back here as a legislature, we actually had a mamava in the basement of the LOB so I could keep pumping. So congratulations and well done, team. Well done. We are modernizing. Again, we did the special committee on childcare, and that's awesome. I think we need to keep pushing for that. We also did a special committee on housing with some big wins this year, so pat yourselves on the back for those bipartisan wins on housing. I'm really proud of modernizing a little bit of our parking reform for multifamily. I think that will make a big difference for developments. And for those of you who know about development, real estate development in existing lots, we can now reevaluate parking, and there's real opportunity for housing. I recently lost my primary election for Senate, but that doesn't mean that I am done. I am incredibly proud of the work that we've all done as elected officials, and you all know what it feels like to win or lose an election. So I feel for you, I feel with you, I'm here, I stand beside you, and I am taking a sabbatical for 2 years. My middle name is Joy. I'll be back. It's been a joy and honor to serve with you. Thank you.
Representative Osborne moves that the House stand in recess for the purpose of receiving messages, after which business is concluded. The House shall stand adjourned for the 2024 session. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House stands adjourned from the 2024 session.